can slow the speed of light down. I didn't know that until I looked into it, but you can. But B, the reason that that's important is that by slowing the speed of light down dramatically, you're changing the nature of these equations that, you know, cause a softening, as he says, of the space-time bubble around the object, which is what it is that allows these objects to move the way they do. This is his physics. By slowing the speed of light down dramatically, you don't need as much energy. That's the key. So, you know, 25 years ago, there was a mathematician named Alcubierre who developed, like we call it, the physics of warp drive. And basically, you need a lot of energy in his equations to create a kind of space-time warping around you to allow you to do this loophole around the speed of light. Within the bubble, you're obeying all the laws of physics, but the bubble is kind of your way of getting around all that. But you need too much energy, and everyone thought, well, we don't know how to do that. But what Sarfati is saying is no. If you slow the speed of light down enough, you can basically cheat. And he said, maybe all you need is a AAA battery to get the effect you want. So anyway, I'm getting way ahead of myself. I'll talk much more about this tomorrow.
Richard,
Monday.
It's Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Oh, I thought, what is today? Sunday.
Sunday?
So Monday.
Yeah, Monday.
Thank you. Appreciate that correction. Monday, yes. But anyway, so back to Hal Puthoff. His talk here actually doesn't go into as much of the detail of science as Sarfati was going, but it's really important to hear this from Hal Puthoff because what he says really makes a difference and it matters. And the fact that he was able to say this and many other things relating to ATIP, relating to much more, is really significant. One of the things he talked about were these 38 papers. So this was published officially by the Defense Intelligence Agency in January of this year, but actually in Puthoff's lecture on Vimeo from June of 2018, these titles are listed. So they actually are there. But anyway, as a result of that, Stephen Aftergood of the American Federation of Scientists put in a FOIA request for the titles, the official titles of these papers from the Defense Intelligence Agency, and received them. And in January of 2019, this year, it made a bit of a news splash. Aftergood himself really ripped these papers. He basically said, implied that we're wasting our tax dollars on science fantasy types of studies and so forth. Sorry to say, it's a very, very limited perspective, a very wrong perspective on these papers at all, absolutely. The subjects were pretty wild. I think, I saw Nick Pope do a thing on Tucker Carlson talking about these. The topics were like traversable wormholes. That's interesting, right? Warp drive and many others. And they are very like Star Trek-y types of papers. And these scientists are thinking, what are we wasting our money on this kind of nonsense? I'll just tell you, I chatted with Hal about these. And I think I've got a slide here. Yeah, here's some of the other topics. So positron aerospace propulsion. Let's see, warp drive, space-time metric engineering. That was his paper. Hal wrote that one. And a lot of these others are written by other scientists, many of them by Dr. Eric Davis, who's his colleague, and a lot of other people from around the world. Anti-gravity for aerospace applications, programmable matter, extra dimensions, invisibility cloaking, like out of Harry Potter. All of these papers are stored on a database called JWICS. It's the Joint Worldwide Intelligence Communication System. And so it's like a defense server that's available to the relevant people who have access to it. And one thing that he told me is that these 38 papers, I should tell you actually why they exist and how they existed. So the way they came about was when the ATIP program started up in 2007. The subcontractor was Robert Bigelow's aerospace company. Bigelow hired Puthoff as one of his scientists, and Puthoff said, look, probably one of the best things I can do for you is to survey a number of top scientists in their respective fields and ask them to describe as best they can the status of their expertise 20 plus years into the future. So he said, I was asking them to envision their future science. He said, what I didn't tell them for these proposed white papers was that they were actually doing this for a UFO program so that we could help understand UFO technology. That was actually his private motivation, the actual motivation. That's not what he told the scientists. He said, look, we just want to get a survey of what you think your field will be like in 20 years. So if you can do that. And that's the result of these 38 papers, one of which remains classified. It's on laser weaponry, but all the others are available. You can read them. I said, well, how can I get them? He said, well, you can probably write to the people. They'll give it to you. I'm like, thanks. It doesn't really. So you have, but they are, in theory, they're available. And I'm sure at some point, many of them will become available to read. So, but what he said to me is that this body of 38 papers, he says, to his knowledge, is by far, the most popular downloads off of the JWICS server within the classified world that he deals with. Like, nothing else is even close. These are go-to, he said, like the Bible of future tech documents is what they're considered collectively, and I think he used that word. So it's not a waste of money, clearly. These are quite valued studies in their field. And this is something that came out in January of 2019. There's another part of the slow drip of disclosure. And things really heated up quite a bit in the last couple of months, haven't they? We have the updated, the news. This is out of Politico, of the U.S. Navy updating its guidelines on UAP reporting. And what's that all about? I mean, I don't know how many people really were able to, the general public, really grasp what was going on, but I think this made some waves. I think this made a little bit of waves in the news. They were very, very quick to say, look, we're not talking about extraterrestrials, but these are some of the quotes here. So the previously unreported move is in response to a series of sightings of unknown, highly advanced aircraft intruding on Navy strike groups and other sensitive military formations and facilities of services. That by itself, that's a very powerful statement. You think about it, like just stop for a moment and just deconstruct this sentence. In response to a series of unknown, highly advanced aircraft intruding on sensitive military locations. Like, and then they just go on. This is a Navy statement. There have been a number of reports of unauthorized and or unidentified aircraft entering various military-controlled ranges and designated airspace in recent years. They really like to use a lot of fancy words, but you can get the idea. For safety and security concerns, the Navy and the Air Force take these reports very seriously and investigate them. So that's interesting. As part of this effort, the Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authorities. A new message to the fleet that will detail the steps for reporting is in draft. Yes, the one thing that not everyone really got is that this is just in draft form. It's not apparently out there yet. And then this paragraph, this sentence. To be clear, the Navy isn't endorsing the idea that its sailors have encountered alien spacecraft, but it is acknowledging that there have been enough strange aerial sightings by credible and highly trained personnel that they need to be recorded and studied rather than dismissed. So, and then you get to Chris Mellon, and they also quote Luis Elizondo. So this is obviously a TTSA orchestrated article here. So be that as it may, they have Mellon here. A former Pentagon official and ex-staffer on the Senate intelligence community said, establishing a more formal means of reporting that the military now calls unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, rather than UFOs, would be a sea change. In other words, having a better means of reporting UAP would be a sea change. And then he says this. This is important, and we'll talk about this. Right now, he says, we have a situation in which UFOs and UAPs are treated as anomalies to be ignored rather than anomalies to be explored. We have systems that exclude that information and dump it. That's where I just say, really? I don't think that I believe that. Now, what's great about Chris Mellon is that he just very recently promoted one of my books as his recommended reading, so thank you, Chris Mellon. Volume 2 of UFOs and National Security State. So I like that. That tells me he's got his head on the right path here. But the way he says this is clearly not believable. UFOs and UAP are treated as anomalies to be ignored. All you do is you go through the very, very extensive history of the encounters that the U.S. military has had with UFOs, and you know that that is not true. And it wasn't true in the 1940s, it wasn't true in the 50s, it wasn't true in the 60s, or any other decade that I can think of. Did it stop being true at some point in the last 20 years? Well, I don't think so. Back in 2002, 2 years before the Tic Tac encounter, remember that there were objects seen over Washington, D.C. in July of that year. That was a very significant sighting. I spoke to a couple of those witnesses myself, and those objects in the air, not far from the Capitol, were being chased by F-16s. So very obviously, there were clear procedures and protocols in place. I don't think that they were ignoring these unknown objects. And by the way, those objects over DC were doing the same kinds of inexplicable maneuvers. One descended, according to the witness, at an 80-degree angle and stopped, waited. F-16s came in pursuit of it, and it just instantly accelerated, according to that witness, Rennie Rogers, who I got to know pretty well. So, swamp gas, right. So, but the point is that here's Mellon saying that we don't really study these things, and we shouldn't be ignoring them. I don't think that's true. But again, I will say, I think I understand why he's coming from this point of view. This, I think, is probably the safest way for them to float this topic, I think. You know, so you have to create a couple of convenient fictions, it seems to me, if you're going to get this subject moving forward in a kind of public relations way. You've got to just pretend, yeah, we're not paying any attention to this. We need to. It's something important. We don't know what this is, and so forth. So that's it. Oh yeah, and then this one. I wanted to use an RT headline. I like to use RT headlines now as much as I can in lectures because they're bad and evil, and you're not supposed to read them. You know, it's dangerous for you to read RT. So here you go. RT actually does some pretty good UFO reporting. So go figure, they do a decent job of it. This one came out on May 22nd. This is what, over just a week ago. The New York Post. Yeah, you know, it was really, I kind of blew them off for they got this really cool series out. I think they wanted me, I just didn't get back to them. And I thought, New York Post, who cares about the New York Post? Well, joke's on me, they've got a really good-looking series coming out there. Anyway, so the New York Post is looking seriously into this, and on May 22nd, there's the announcement that they got confirmation from the Navy of something very significant. Do I have another slide on this? Yes, I do. This is Christopher Sherwood. He was the spokesperson on this occasion for the Pentagon. And he says to the Post, among other things, that ATIP, this is when the ATIP program was going, did pursue research and investigation into unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP. Now, that may not sound like a big deal to you, because you had people like Luis Elizondo and others from TTSA saying this. Hal Puthoff was saying this. But they weren't official spokespersons of the U.S. government. So here's a U.S. military spokesperson confirming that, yeah, we researched and investigated UAP. He didn't even say reports of UAP. He said we were researching, investigating UAP. So you're not going to investigate something that doesn't exist. So in a way, it's almost a tacit admission from an official Pentagon spokesperson that UFOs are real. I mean, it's not an outrageous stretch to say that. I did a YouTube thing on this when it came out, and I almost wanted to title it, Pentagon Admits UFOs Are Real. It would be a little too sensationalist for my taste, so I didn't do it. But you could have done it. Like, it's a bare possibility, it's a stretch. But it's a very powerful statement. John Greenwald of the Black Vault, I think, said something like he was shocked that a military spokesperson would say something that direct about UAP, but it happened. That was only just about a week ago. And that was kind of a big statement, right? And then we get to, much more recently, the last bombshell by the New York Times, which, by the way, I personally think is a better article than the other two that they did a year and a half ago. Not that those were bad, but I think this is a genuinely strong article, a really strong article. And Leslie Kane, one of the authors of this piece, I had a brief communication with her, and she just said that she was actually shocked by the response that this article is getting. It's much more profound than the first two that came out in December of 2017. This is bigger. This is the New York Times, again, essentially saying in a very clear way that the UFOs that we talked about a year and a half ago, they are real, and the Navy is encountering them. And I want to break this article down for you a little bit here. This is just the beginning of it. Helene Cooper, Ralph Blumenthal, Leslie Kane, May 26th, just less than 1 week ago. The strange objects, one of them like a spinning top moving against the wind, appeared almost daily from the summer of 2014 to March 2015. So by the way, how long a period of time? That's about 9 months roughly. Middle of summer of 2014, let's say March of 2015, 9 months, something like that. That's 270 days, give or take. Almost daily for 270 days. It's a lot of UFO sightings. If we're to believe this, that's a lot of UFO sightings, encounters. Or UAPs, thank you very much. Yes, thank you for the direction. UAPs. And then the next part of this is also interesting. No visible engine or infrared exhaust plume, so no well-defined heat signature from these things that you would get with, jets and heat coming out of the back. But they would reach 30,000 feet at hypersonic speeds. In case you don't know what hypersonic is, it's super fast, roughly speaking, like about 5,000 miles per hour, give or take. Could be a little slower, could be a little faster. Very fast. Okay, very, very fast. Ryan Graves was one of the two pilots that they named in this article. He said these things would be out there all day. And interesting point is that keeping an aircraft in the air requires a significant amount of energy. And he said with the speeds we observed, 12 hours in the air is 11 hours longer than you'd expect. In other words, these things should have been up there for like an hour with the amount of energy that they were taking up. What happened here? Oh, okay. Oh, a couple of bullet points that I wanted. So these are some of the main points of the New York Times article. So that they were seen in 2014, 2015, almost daily for 9 months, off the aircraft carrier Theodore Roosevelt. This is on the U.S. East Coast. So the Tic Tac UFO is off the West Coast. These are off the East Coast, off Virginia, basically. Hypersonic speeds, as I mentioned, instant acceleration, stopping, maneuvering, all of that. And then I just mentioned they require tremendous energy, which the Navy, we don't have aircraft that can generate the amount of power to do the things that these things are doing. So one of maybe the most dramatic element in this article was the description of a near collision, said to be in late 2014. So the situation was you have two FA-18 Super Hornet pilots. They're doing a training mission. They're flying in tandem about 100 feet apart from each other. And an object zooms between them the article wasn't really clear if it was coming at them or from behind them, but I got this feeling it's from behind them. It would make more sense anyway. Anyway, zooms between them. One of the pilots got a good look at it and said it was the shape of a sphere with a cube inside. That's very odd. Now, I mean, in the UFO literature, there are a number of craft of a spherical shape that are reported, certainly. And there are even some that are sometimes described as cube-like. A cube inside a sphere is very interesting. Of course, you don't really know. It's moving very, very fast, and how good a look the pilot got at it is a good question to ask. But nonetheless, that's a really dramatic thing to do. To fly between two FA-18s. Those are great aircraft, and this thing just goes right by them. And by the way, at this point, they were all thinking, up to that point, they were thinking, well, maybe what we're encountering are classified drones. I don't really know if that's what they believed. I mean, that's what they say. Who knows what they really believe, but they were at least laboring under this assumption that, well, maybe there's a classified drone project. But the instant one of these things is flying between two of them on a training mission, that's dangerous. Like, that's really dangerous. And that got them angry. And that got them understanding that this is probably not a classified drone program. Let's just put it that way. And whoever it is really getting on our nerves because they're not supposed to be doing that. Nowhere in this article did anyone hypothesize that it's the Russians or the Chinese. And I wonder, I mean, I don't know, I wonder if at the top brass is concerned that the Russians are they've got some incredible invention and they're challenging the United States military in one way or another. I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible. I would tend to doubt this. It would seem to be highly provocative and also dangerous for a lot of reasons. You know, their object might get damaged and fall into American hands. Who knows? It just seems like it would be a risk that you wouldn't want to take. And on top of the fact that it's not very evident or even plausible that the Russians or Chinese have created this, particularly since the capabilities of this object in 2014 are pretty comparable to these objects that we've been tracking for the last 70 years or more. So there's that. But of course, none of the history is in these articles. And then the other point of the Times article is that a number of these incidents were videotaped, or video recorded. One of them, of course, was released. I think that was the so-called Go Fast video. But apparently there are many others that we do not know about. So that was a New York Times piece. The same day as the Times article was this video released on YouTube, the Nimitz encounter. Has anyone seen this?
Yeah.
All right. This is very well done. So I don't yet know who is everyone behind this. I mean, it's the YouTube channel. I think it's called the Nimitz YouTube channel, and I think it's created by a lot of the guys who were involved in the encounter from 2004. This is the Tic Tac UFO encounter. This is Petty Officer Voorhees on the bottom and radar operator Kevin Day on the top there. And there's a lot of other people involved in this. This is only 30 minutes. It's exceptionally well done and produced. This is one graphic that they create of the Tic Tac UFO there above the water. Do I have anything else on this? No, so let me just focus on this for a bit. One of the things, Kevin Day has done a number of interviews. I just listened to him with Alejandro Rojas a few weeks ago. And wow, is he a very good witness. So he was the radar operator on the Princeton, excuse me, I'm saying the Nimitz. And he made the observation on one occasion of tracking an object. There were multiple Tic Tac UFOs, there was not just one. And one of them was at the altitude of 28,000 feet. And he said it dropped to sea level in 0.78 seconds, was his statement. So you take out your calculator, that's 24,000, more than 24,000 miles per hour in less than 1 second. So stopping, accelerating 24,000 miles per hour, stopping at sea level. So what can do that? It reminds you of, remember if you're familiar with the Belgian UFO event of 1990, the object that dropped in altitude of close to a mile in about a second. That's not as fast as this, but that's pretty fast. So that's Kevin Day's statement, and there's a number of other statements about this. One of the things that I referred to earlier in this talk, I'll just mention here, is the security in the aftermath of this encounter. So what we learned, I did not know this, and I hadn't gotten this anywhere else. Maybe I wasn't aware, but after the event, individuals came on the ship and just confiscated all of the data of the encounter. So everything that was being recorded is just gone, and of course that's all against protocol. They don't know who these guys were, they just came, took everything, left. In 2004. Now, there's a lot of things to keep in mind. In 2004, we kind of forget the U.S. was at war. You know, we were 3 years after 9/11. We were a year and a half into the war on terror, you know, in Iraq. We had been in Afghanistan for a little longer than that. So the U.S. was on a definite war footing. And when you have an object that is able to challenge your best aircraft in such an incredible manner, that's definitely going to get a lot of attention, you know, without a doubt. So anyway, I would encourage you to check this out, the Nimitz encounter. It's quite good. And, you know, Tracy and I were wondering, was this part of the History Channel's rollout of Unidentified? Is it related? And since we didn't get a chance to see Unidentified last night, I don't know. I don't think that this is the same thing as a TV show, but they've got to be related. The production values on this are the highest level. They're really well done. So this comes out the same day as the New York Times article. The aftermath of the New York Times piece is still happening now. I mean, in fact, I haven't been able to keep up with it all. There's more and more. So the Washington Post did an op-ed that said UFOs exist and everyone needs to adjust to that fact. What? Are you kidding me? The Washington Post. I mean, you know, Snark Central, and they put an op-ed piece. I didn't, but one of the members of our website investigated the author of this and said, what was his name? Dolan, or I can't remember. I'd never heard of him. He's a political science professor, I think. But apparently he's a very, very staunch neocon empire builder, the kind that the Washington Post love to have. So it's just worth keeping in mind. Some of the people getting on board with this, what really are they all about? Are they team players being asked to, you know, chip in for the team and put this article out? I mean, I wonder about this. I don't know his story. Definitely the case, a lot of follow-up news on, you know, from a variety of publications talking about this subject in a very serious way. And again, before I move to the next segment of this, we should all just stop and reflect on just how much information is coming out right now on this. And is it possible to do a rollback at this point from what has come out? I don't know. I don't think so, personally. This issue has just been pushed forward in a very significant way. So I think that's very important, and we're not done. And then last night was Unidentified, which, did anyone have a chance to see it?
Yeah.
Quite a few. So it's good, not good?
No.
I think it had good reviews.
I saw the previews.
One person does this, some thumbs up.
No, it was very good.
I got the impression it was quite good, and I'm sure there were limits to it. One of the things that I will assume is the continued, you know, history-free presentation of the subject. But again, I think that's part of this controlled disclosure. But it was good, so I want to get a chance to see it. I think it's a 6-part series that's coming out, yeah. So we were told good production values, good presentation, believable witnesses, and so on. And there's Elizondo there. So let's, how long have I been going? So is this about an hour? Okay, so when am I supposed to stop?
4:25.
4:25? Oh, this I think will work out quite well. So I think, well, look, all I'm going to tell you, I don't have inside information on this. I don't have inside sources that are really able to tell me anything. All that I'm doing is probably what you're trying to do, which is think this through as logically and figure out what's actually happening. So what I believe currently is the case is someone has made a decision that this secret can't last forever. I think it's impossible to keep it contained forever. It seems to me that the decision has been made to release much more information and to do it in as controlled a way as possible. You know, many years ago when I was talking about fascist disclosure, it's kind of what we're seeing. I mean, I'm not saying that this is fascist disclosure. That's a stronger word than I would want to use today. But it's actually very much along the lines of what I was thinking back then. In other words, if you get to a point where you control the system well enough, you control the means of communication well enough, where you're confident that your narrative will be the dominant narrative, then you can roll out this information in a careful way so that you don't lose control over it. So that the wrong questions from your point of view aren't being asked, like, where's the bodies? Or where's the secret tech programs? You know, how you made this cover-up last for so long, and so forth. That's not the kinds of questions that people want to answer, I think. So you rebrand, you change the nature of the UFO subject. You rename it, and in renaming it, you redefine it. And I absolutely believe that's what's going on here, a redefinition of the UFO phenomenon. One that is where the ET component is being removed. The problem with that, as I see it, is how far can they go with this? How far can they go with an explanation of, we don't know what these are. They're moving in ways that are incomprehensible. They're real. We're encountering them. We don't know what they are. How many times can you say, we don't know what they are, before people start asking the obvious? Are they from a technology from another civilization? If not our own. If we, the American national security community, can't figure this out, then are we really going to say, wow, maybe the Chinese are on some super advanced science? Where's the evidence for that? I mean, in other words, what's happening is that this rebranded UFO phenomenon, all they're doing is dancing around the obvious. And I continually am asking, like, how long can they do that? You know, it's disclosure without the history. They're taking all of that out. They're doing an amazing job at doing it. Very effective. Yes, they're clearly, the members of TTSA are clearly centrally involved in this. So my best guess is that they are, and this includes Al, and this includes all the others, they're given permission to serve as maybe the front men of this new disclosure movement. That's what it looks like to me. And yeah, they're probably, I'm going to assume that they're probably hoping to get a little something out of it, maybe make some money, maybe get some contracts, maybe who knows, maybe they want to be famous. I don't know what they want. They may have some motivations, but the important thing is that they're pushing through this very controlled narrative. I will stay here now since, I mean, they're all out there, they're all talking about this. I mean, I've chatted about UFOs with Hal Puthoff for many years. And, you know, he was very, very quiet about his interest in UFOs because he wasn't supposed to have a public interest in UFOs. But the fact is he was extremely, extremely well-versed in this subject, which he was and is. He's 82 years old now. He's a very brilliant man, And I don't know what all of his security clearances are, but I'm sure they're very high and extensive. And he knows a lot of things. And he's just been constrained about talking about them legally until 2018. In that lecture that I referenced from June of last year, he stated openly, he said, I'm only allowed to talk about these now for the first time without going to jail.
Wow.
So he and the other members of that organization, are, it seems to me, they are the point guys, the point people to push this forward at this time. And it's not like they don't believe in it. I think they do believe in it. But someone's given a go-ahead. And I don't know who that someone is. I don't know if it's President Trump. I don't know if it's some other high-level person in the intelligence community. I don't know who it is. But someone has made a decision that this is going to move ahead. I don't know whose authorization. What do I have here? Let me look at these. So the inevitability of this is, I think, why this is happening. They're trying to create a safe form of disclosure. The problem with it is, as I guess I've been saying all along, I don't think UFOs can easily be tamed. They're trying to put a tame version of this out there. And this is anything but a tame phenomenon. It's not tame because, A, we don't understand all of our science. We don't really know the motivations, really. We can hypothesize. And then beyond that, it's not tame because the entire world has been having interactions with this phenomenon for a long time. And many people have had either traumatic experiences or transformative experiences with this phenomenon. So it's something that has emotional impact for many, many people in this world. This is not a subject that's just, they're going to be able to tie up in a very neat little package, in a nice, neat little disclosure package, and say, something appears to be here. We don't know what it is. Like, that's not going to work, in my opinion. So I don't know what the plan is. Is this part of a multi-stage plan? Someone was discussing this with me recently. Is this very controlled form of disclosure simply stage one of a multi-stage program? And maybe that's possible. Maybe that's what's going to happen. I don't know. So let me just put all these out here as well. The real issue is when this comes, by the way, I do have a mini bombshell in a moment. Not really a bombshell, but it may be a little bit around the edges. So just, you gotta wait for it.
Kaboom!
So I'm asking here, can the establishment truly dominate the narrative? That's the real question. How long will that be able to go? I mean, all of us are asking different kinds of questions. We're just not really getting a much broader audience, and they don't seem to be listening to us. The three big questions that I'm thinking of that have to be asked is, can we address and understand the corrupt nature of the cover-up itself, how that has corrupted our society for 70 plus years now? That's one big thing. 2, abductions, and let's just say abductions and encounters. You know, where the rubber meets the road, where we're encountering them. There's been a lot of these cases. There's no question in my mind that it's real, and that's part of this. It's going to be very hard in the long run to separate out the UAP phenomenon from alien abductions. UFO research has been trying to do that since we've been talking about alien abductions. There have always been researchers who don't like the fact that there's these cases of alien abduction. They'd much rather talk about nuts and bolts craft landing and, you know, how large was it, and when you hold it, was it as big as a nickel or a dime or whatever. They like that. But the phenomenon is a lot more complicated and much more profound. And then the third question that I think has got to be asked is the status of reverse engineered technologies and the status of our science's attempt to understand what they're doing. By the way, when when Puthoff put out the call for those white papers, when you got those 38 papers back I really wonder, like, is it true or not true that there is a highly advanced, classified science that these people are not aware of? And I haven't been able to figure that out. 10 years ago or more, I talked about a breakaway civilization. It's an idea that I can't shake. I mean, and I know a lot of other people can't shake it either, but the real question that I have to ask is it true or is it not true that the classified scientific world has genuine scientific breakthroughs, conceptual breakthroughs in physics that we haven't gotten? I don't know. I'm not really confident in saying that they have. Have they achieved breakthroughs in other types of technologies that are not as revolutionary, maybe in propulsion or energy? I guess I absolutely think it's possible. But I have to tell you, I don't know how far they are. And it's an important question that we're going to have to ask with this disclosure process is, what is the status of reverse engineered technologies? And that leads me to this man. This is Vice Admiral Thomas R. Wilson. So this is a slide I wrote originally in 2007. Talked about this for a while. I've just updated this picture. That's a nicer picture. Thomas Wilson, back in 1997, was head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's a position known as J2. It's important, right? After that, he became director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. That was overlapping the end of the Clinton era with the beginning of the Bush era. And then he retired in 2002 and became a senior vice president with a company called ATK. They described themselves as an advanced weapon and space systems company. So it turns out that in 1997, Admiral Thomas Wilson met with Stephen Greer and Edgar Mitchell and one other gentleman whose name I know, but I don't yet want to put the name out there. I don't know if it's publicly known. But let me just say this. It came to my attention in I guess this was 07, early 07. And I've talked about this, so it's not the first time I'm talking about it. But I haven't talked about it in a little while, and I think the time is right to discuss this again. So in 07, I met with a gentleman who showed me 2 pieces of paper typed. And they were notes of an interview that one person had done with another person. And the notes were about this other person's, and that other person was this man, Wilson. So Wilson's name wasn't in the notes. I found out later it was him. This one individual had interviewed Wilson about Wilson's encounter with Greer and Mitchell in 97. So back in 1997, Stephen Greer and Edgar Mitchell were working together. Greer was taking him around through Washington, D.C., trying to get interviews with members of Congress, members of the Senate, members of Joint Chiefs of Staff, anyone else who would listen, about deep black classified programs to study alien technology and alien bodies. Now Greer, whatever else you say about him, was right on the money. He had this exactly right, and he knew that there were these programs. And apparently he had some specific information. So they finally get a meeting with Admiral Wilson, who at the time was head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And it was with Wilson and a couple of other people. It wasn't him alone. And they described the nature of their research and what they learned. And you've got a moonwalking astronaut there, so you don't want to blow these people off. And they listened. And Greer's argument, which he wrote about incidentally in his book Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, which is when he outed Wilson at the time. Greer's argument was there are rogue, black budget programs to study alien tech and alien bodies, and the US government is really not on top of it. These are runaway private secrecy. And you, as a member of the US government, representative government, should get on top of this in the name of the US citizens and all that. So that was basically, as far as I understand, that was the argument. So I'm reading these notes of someone who interviewed Wilson in the aftermath of all of this. And, this is a classic, I was allowed to look but not touch type of interview. I was allowed to read the papers, couldn't write it down, couldn't photograph it. It was like, okay, fine, whatever. So I read them as carefully as I could, remembered it, and then actually, Greer's book came out. He mentioned Wilson by name. I went back to my source and said, so it was Wilson. He said, yep. So I found Thomas Wilson, and I always felt a little bad about this. I did an ambush interview on the poor guy, but hey, So I found him, found where he worked. I said, I'm doing some research having to do with the U.S. Navy, and your name is featured prominently in what I'm doing. I'd like to be able to talk with you. He said, by all means. And he gave me his phone number. We got on the phone. I immediately said, well, I'm actually researching UFOs. Before you hang up, your name is important in this conversation. And, when the conversation started, I actually heard him. I literally heard him sinking into this nice, comfortable chair behind his desk for a nice, comfy, happy interview. It didn't last long. So he said, UFOs, what? And I said, well, actually, yeah, your name appeared in a book by Dr. Stephen Greer, who indicates that you met with him. He said, I have no memory of this. He said, my memory is foggy. He actually said, my memory is foggy. I thought, who says that? All right. So, my memory is foggy. But I said, look, sir, I know you met with them. I spoke to Edgar Mitchell. I spoke to one of Greer's people. I couldn't reach Greer, who knows why. And I spoke to another scientist who's also quite famous, and you may know him. Everyone confirmed you were there. So I know you were there. Well, oh yes, I remember. The only reason I met with them is I was curious why a moonwalking astronaut would be interested in such a topic as UFOs. Everything, and he made me read the passage in Greer's book about this. And he said, everything else is poppycock. I'm thinking, who says poppycock? That's old, dude. But anyway, his voice got very high-pitched. And he said, I have another meeting, I've got to go. Click. So he was very upset. Actually, 2 days later, I got a phone call from a journalist out of D.C. who wanted to do a really positive article on UFOs and wanted to know all of my sources. I'm not kidding. So it was an honor to talk about Wilson. But here's the thing. So I want to go back to this point. This is very important. So what happened in the transcript of the interview that I read with my eyes, Wilson was very upset because what actually happened is he met with Greer and Mitchell in April of 1997. And within 2 months, in June of 97, he found or was able to obtain an audience with the key members of this particular special access program that was charged with studying alien technology and alien bodies. And he found them. And this is his statement in this interview with this other individual, which I'm reading. And he was upset for a couple of reasons. A, he was denied access because he didn't have a need to know about this. Like, he learned that the program existed. He was able to get that much confirmation. But he was not able to gain any kind of access or participation in the program in any way. And primarily, one of the key reasons he was even able to get an audience at all is they wanted to find out how he knew about them. They wanted to find out how he learned about them. The key statement that I will never forget that he said is that this technology was not from our civilization, not made by human hands. That was his way of putting it. The technology, it wasn't Russian, it wasn't Chinese, he said. It wasn't Russian. It was not from Earth. So you have the head of intelligence of the Joint Chiefs telling someone in an interview a couple of years after the fact, I think this interview was done in 2003, around then, I think, that he had his own confirmation of the existence of deeply classified technologies to study alien tech. Now, I'm saying it here because, I know my source on this, and I know my source is exactly, absolutely right. And I will just say, this issue is not done. This issue is bubbling at subterranean levels in various ways, and it will come out. So when it comes out, how it comes out, I don't know, but it will. So it will make the whole disclosure process a much more complicated event. And it makes me wonder, how much are you going to be able to control this now? You're going to keep pretending and putting out this fiction that we don't know what these UAP are. You know, back in the 1970s, the UFO researcher Leonard Stringfield was interviewing dozens and then scores of people from within the military who told him one story after another story, after another story, after another story of their encounter with alien bodies, programs to study alien bodies, programs to study alien technology. Stringfield was getting this back then. And, you know, he got a lot of criticism from other researchers because sometimes he couldn't give up all the names of the people and everyone wanted to double check his sources. And it's understandable, but look, there's a lot of detail in those accounts of Leonard Stringfield. He had one of his sources was a doctor out of New York City, or in the northeastern U.S., mostly out of New York, and this doctor had said to him, I did an autopsy of an alien being. Not as many cuts as Emery Smith, I guess. That was a joke, yeah.
I know.
Look, I'm not making a judgment here on Emery Smith at this point, but this doctor did state that he'd done alien autopsies. And Stringfield interviewed him extensively, and then I wrote about this in one of my books. Stringfield just lost all contact. The guy just cut off contact with him. He said, sorry, I got into trouble for talking with you. I got my knuckles rapped or smacked, he said. So he just stopped being able to talk to him. But Stringfield found a lot of these people, you know, and a lot of them came to him because it became known that he was the crash retrieval guy. Even before Stanton Friedman became really well known for the Roswell case, Stringfield, based out of near Cincinnati, Ohio, was very active in acquiring these stories. So, you know, the story that we have here with Admiral Wilson, it's a good account, and it comes from a very high-level individual that I believe this is not done. This is going to continue. But the fact is that Stringfield and many others have been looking into this evidence for a long time, and it's going to be real tough to contain it. So I need to wrap this up because I've got 10 minutes here. Really enjoyed this, by the way. I hope you've enjoyed it as well. I don't know if we'll have time for many questions. I'll try to wrap this up. I just want to get my final thought here. We're in an era where I don't really know where we're going to be, how fast this is going. Things seem to be going very fast. One of the things that I feel good that I got right 10 years ago when I wrote After Disclosure was, I said this process, once it starts, has the potential to take on an unstoppable momentum. And that leads to this, like the avalanche. So will this avalanche happen or not? And I actually think it's possible that it will happen. Because much more has happened at this point than I can tell you I would have expected by now. I'm going to guess most of you. But it is entirely possible. I would never underestimate the power of the establishment media to control narratives. They're really good at it. And they're going to continue to deplatform as they need to, censure in one way or another as they need to, and control spin and manipulate, dishonestly manipulate search algorithms and on and on. They'll continue to do that. So maybe they'll be able to even downplay, even greater revelations that come out. But I don't know. Much more has come out than I thought. The latest thing that, as I started before we, I think, began recording was the claim, apparently, the claim that Jimmy Church told me earlier today that Luis Elizondo was accused by the Pentagon spokesperson as having never worked at ATIP. That's interesting. I'm not inclined to accept that statement at face value. I am suspecting that there's something else going on here, but I can't pretend that I know. So we're just gonna have to see. This is a really interesting time that we're in, and if we meet again in a year, who knows where the situation is going to be. It's really quite fascinating. As every now and then someone says, well, you shouldn't hope for disclosure because then you'll be out of a job. And I'm like, are you kidding, man? It's just going to be starting. So thank you very much for being here. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. If you want to chat with us after, I have a table with Tracy where a lot of the other tables are. So thanks very much.
And I'll just say, if you want a DVD of this talk, they'll be right out there in an hour. If you want to keep up with Richard and Tracy, go to their YouTube channel, which feeds me every week. This is the information. It really does. This guy. Excellent. Yes.
Thank you, Alan Steinfeld. By the way, Alan's got new realities, which is awesome. And you can go to our YouTube channel, which is just Richard Dolan. There's our website, Richard Dolan Press, Richard Dolan members. A number of you are here. Glad to have you here, by the way. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
When are you going to do it?
Thanks, man. Yeah.
You think tonight or tomorrow?
Tonight.
Oh, you're going to do it tonight?
Tonight at 9. Did I get your number?
What about?
Kirsten's got my number.
Okay,
Yeah.
she's
So tonight at 9?
Yeah,
Okay.
if worst comes to worst, are you gonna go to the Blue Book thing? I already asked you.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the way out, we'll
After the
do
blue
that.
book? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Jocelyn,
see
you're
you
a number
later.
now too, right?
Yeah, it was another edition.
Jocelyn, I got your messages, I just didn't have time to respond.
I knew it.
Okay.
I don't expect a response because all I want to do is vent.
We don't know who it was. We've never heard.
I haven't read it in about 10 years. Probably should get back to it.
No. What was that about?
Of course, it was fundamentally truthful.
Andrew Collins
But I do know from talking to Bill Burns, his co-author,
talks
that Corso was
talks here